more and more people to come forward and get tested. If you have the mildest symptoms, especially if you live in a community that has known cases, please come forward and get tested. I can't stress that enough. We will only get through this pandemic with some semblance of normal life if people with the mildest symptoms come forward and get tested. That's absolutely essential. I want to thank everybody who has done that. But of course, at this stage of the week, we always ask people to ramp up that rate of testing as the winter months approach. And we know that people will have flu-like symptoms. Please assume it's COVID. Don't just assume it's the cold or the flu. Please make sure you make that assumption and come forward and get tested. I also note today is a special day for all students and parents and school communities across the state. As students return to school, it's very pleasing to know that we've been able to do that. But it's also pleasing to know we've been able to do that by ensuring every measure of safety in and around our school communities. I want to thank the Minister Mitchell, who's with me today, the Department of Education, but also, in addition to the public schools, the Catholic and independent school systems who've really worked hard to make that possible today. And additionally, we know that as children are going back to school today, there are 14 brand new schools that have been upgraded, which students will go into today, with a 15th to open very shortly. So please know that whilst we're dealing with the pandemic, we're also getting on with the job of building our schools. Those 190 schools that we said we'd upgrade or build are on track, with 15 of those being completed in Term 2 for students to enjoy. Can I thank also parents for listening to our advice in relation to not only schools being open and safe, but also in relation to how students get to school. And we've noticed very positively that sufficient numbers of students have either been walking or getting dropped off or catching a dedicated school service, and our public transport system to date doesn't seem to have buckled under the pressure, and that is a very positive sign as well. I'll now ask Dr. Chant to give her daily update, and then Minister Mitchell will give us further details about schools.
So there were 3 additional cases in the 24 hours to 8 p.m. on the 24th of May, and this brings the total confirmed cases to 3,090, and 4,276 people were tested. There were no new deaths in the reporting period, with the death total remaining at 50 overall. There's currently 90 COVID cases being treated by New South Wales Health, and this includes 1 person in intensive care unit whom is being ventilated. The majority of the cases treated by New South Wales Health are being managed in a non-acute out-of-hospital care setting. In relation to the 2 locally cases that we're investigating, as the Premier indicated, one of the cases is being diagnosed from a hotel quarantine. There's a 71-year-old lady from southeastern Sydney Local Health District, and we are undertaking some additional testing because we feel that she may well have had the disease for a while. So we are undertaking serological testing on her to confirm that she may well have had the disease many weeks ago. Public health contact tracing is being undertaken, nevertheless in a precautionary way. There's also an 85-year-old male from Sydney Local Health District, and that case is currently under investigation. I'd also just like to draw your attention to the fact that our website from New South Wales Health will be updated with some new data, and that our testing data will be updated. Previously, we've been reporting people tested, and into the future, because we're actually asking for people to come forward repeatedly, as the Premier indicated, repeatedly throughout the year ahead, we are now moving to report number of tests. We won't be reporting test numbers once someone becomes positive, because we want it to reflect those people that are being tested to confirm COVID. So those details will be changed on our website, and that will mean that our testing numbers actually are increased, and this is in line with the national reporting requirements. So I'm happy to take any questions about that and clarify that later.
Well, good morning, everybody. I think it's an exciting day for lots of parents and teachers and students right across New South Wales as we see our children return to the classroom. Again, we're so grateful to our school communities for all the preparation work that they've done to have our students back, the additional cleaning and the hygiene supplies. And by all accounts this morning, things are going very well. I think there's a lot of excitement in classrooms. And as the Premier said, we've got 15 school communities across New South Wales who this term will be learning in new classrooms. Right across Sydney, in the Hunter and on the Central Coast, over 130 new classrooms across those 15 schools this term, new libraries, new halls, new canteens, and that's building on the other schools that we had open so far this year. I think we're up to 38 new and upgraded schools so far in 2020, which is fantastic because it's important that we keep that infrastructure work happening even in the middle of a pandemic. Can I say to our school communities again, thank you for all the work that you've done to prepare to have students back. It's exciting to have them back in the classroom, and we're looking forward to being back into some kind of normal when it comes to education in New South Wales.
Questions? Premier, there's been a lot of discussion surrounding everything else that's over, but we haven't heard much about kids. Is there any update on the progress?
Oh, look, we're still working with the industry on that, and Dr. Chant might want to add this, but obviously frequent use of equipment at short intervals poses a health risk, and so we're working with the industry on a safe return there. So we're not in a position to make any announcement yet.
Obviously, it's the first day back to school. That meant many people also using public transport. I mean, what did you see this morning? Are you pretty happy with how people are behaving? Were kids able to get to school?
Look, I'm extremely pleased with the reports we've had to date. It's very early days, but I can't thank the community enough for taking the government's advice. The numbers we've received to date, obviously I can't account for every single bus and every single train carriage, but generally speaking the numbers are in accordance with the advice we gave, and I'm very pleased about that. We're not taking any chances. Yes, we want to ease life back into some semblance of normality, but we don't want to do it at the risk of too many people getting the disease, and so I'm extremely pleased with the way in which people have responded generally. And we please ask every single business, every single person who leaves home to think about their actions in the workplace or think about their actions when they're moving around, because your action can make the difference between someone getting the disease or not. And I'm very pleased to date with the way in which the community has really rallied together and taken our advice, and I really appreciate it.
There weren't a great deal of people parking at Moore Park this morning. Do you have there weren't a great deal of cars parking at Moore Park this morning. Do you have a message for people who are working in the CBD?
Well, no, I think that people are making informed decisions about what they do. Workplaces are making informed decisions about what advice they give their workers about where they can work from. And I think the good news is there hasn't been a mass change of heart overnight. People are thinking clearly about what the future looks like for them, easing their way back into some semblance of normality, and that's very pleasing. I'm very grateful that people are easing back into doing some things they did pre-COVID, but all of us know that life is different. We have to live with this pandemic, and I'm very pleased that there hasn't been a mad rush, that people are considering their options and doing it in a very considered way.
Do you have any estimate on school attendance today yet? I mean, do you expect...
Yeah, we have. It's not too much. I mean, obviously there's always an existing rate of absenteeism, and today is not that much higher than what it would have been pre-COVID. But we know that parents are also listening, because we've said ordinarily if your child had a sniffle or a mild symptom, you'd be likely to tell them to go to school, and we're grateful that parents aren't doing that. We're grateful that parents are keeping their children home, even with the milder symptoms. Please don't assume your child has a cold. Please assume it could be something more sinister, and we're grateful that people are taking the opportunity to keep their children at home if there's even the mildest sign of illness.
It appears that there was an awful lot of...
I'm sorry?
Is there a figure to go with that?
Look, we'll have a better figure towards the end of the day, but early indications from the Minister are that it doesn't far exceed what would be normal rate of absenteeism. I do assume it will be higher than the normal rate of absenteeism, but at a healthy rate.
What are you going to do? There are some parents, probably small, who are choosing to keep their children at home really for no reason other than they are nervous about COVID-19. What are you going to do to work with those families or follow up? You said last week that they'll be marked absentee and the normal processes will follow.
Yeah, our position doesn't change, and from all reports that I've seen, it's a very, very small proportion of parents. That's a matter for them, but their children will be marked as absent. We're not changing our policy. I appreciate that a small percentage of parents make those choices, but all choices come with consequences, and that's a matter for them.
It appears there were an awful lot of buses that were overcrowded this morning at about 8 to 9 o'clock in the peak hour, with not enough space for commuters on board. Is the transport system in the peak going to cope with people returning to work and returning to school?
Well, I think that's yet to be determined. We're still in the very early stages, and what I do know is that the guidelines and rules we've put in place make sure that people can travel safely to and from work. We've also provided a number of alternate options, and I know that many individuals and workplaces are considering what their options are into the future.
Is there any room to have those limits eased somewhat on the bus?
There are opportunities if we find, because we've taken a very conservative approach to public transport compared to other parts of the world, and there are options we have, but initially we wanted to take a very conservative approach, and we'll keep working with the health experts on their health advice, but definitely we've taken a very conservative approach as to what capacity looks like in the peak. We're not in a position to change that at all, because we want to ensure the health of everybody travelling or using public transport, but we do have options before us into the future.
Well, what's the health advice then on the maximum on a bus?
Well, at this stage it's 1.5 metres.
But is it 12 or is it more?
Well, no, it's whatever the current figures are.
There are limits on public transport. You're still telling most people that you want to work from home. Are you expecting, or do you want to see a revival in busy hubs like the CBD gradually, or where do you stand on that at this point?
Well, I think where we stand on that point is where we've stood on this point for a number of weeks now. We're confident that workplaces are taking very informed decisions. We give our best advice, and workplaces are responding. And I think where possible, people are still working from home. And I've, anecdotally know that many businesses are considering some staff coming back and some working from home on a roster basis. That's been going on, but I'm very pleased that the system hasn't been overwhelmed to date, that people are listening, making informed decisions, and that's the way we'd like it to continue. And as the weeks progress and we keep on top of the data and see what the increased activity does on the number of cases, we'll be able to provide further updates to the community.
Premier, what's your view on...
I'm sorry?
Getting home this afternoon. I mean, obviously everyone's got to work today or got to school. What has to happen this evening, when perhaps we might see more people at a closer amount of time trying to get home?
Well, the advice doesn't change during the day. The advice is very consistent. Avoid using public transport in the peak. And get home safely, and please respect the guidelines we've put in place. And our transport system has made it very clear for commuters as to where is a safe place to sit or stand. And we also ask people to be careful around bus stops and train stations. Make sure that if there's a lot of people around, that you're keeping your social distancing. If there's a lot of people around, that you're making sure you're not unwittingly getting the disease or spreading the disease just by standing in a queue. Often when we speak about easing restrictions, our biggest concern remains people actually transferring the disease whilst they're waiting for a service or waiting to get into something. So please just be mindful wherever you're standing, especially if you're around a surface. Avoid touching surfaces, avoid touching handrails, avoid touching things which a lot of other people may have touched. And please make sure you frequently keep your hand hygiene and general hygiene up. These are all important things we need to do during the duration of the pandemic, no matter who we are or where we are. And it's just about planning ahead, thinking ahead, and being extra cautious.